Welcome to a new daily top AskReddit video. Today's topic:
Ex-prisoners, what is the saddest thing you've ever seen in prison? As a kid, I went to kid jail, for accidentally setting some woods on fire, bonfire out of control, situation, and my cellmate was only a few years younger than me. He was a super nice, laid-back guy. We got along great, and even sort of became friends while there. I was just a kid, so I didn't really ask any questions about different colors of jumpsuits and people's reasons for being there. The day I got out, I found out he was in there for murder. Apparently he got really tired of his stepdad physically abusing him and he killed him. I never really knew all of the details, but I can tell you that when talking to him, he seemed like a good kid at heart. Had things and people that he cared about, things he wanted to do, interests, etc. The guards obviously must have known, but they were always super nice to him, noticeably so, even more so than other inmates. I always wondered what happened to him. A kid like that I don't see as a murderer, he was a kid being abused and didn't know what to do. Kids can't just leave and go find another family. Of course he committed a crime and should be accountable, but I find it sad when I hear about kids like this. It's like women who kill their abusive mates. He probably felt safer and more comfortable in prison. I'd be interested in finding out where he is. As for you young man, setting fires, lol, I really hope you learned your lesson. I saw a post, a while ago, about two sisters that put aside half of their income or something, for their brother, who was in prison. The partner of one of the sisters found out, and raised hell about it. When asked why the women put aside half of their income for their brother, she answered something like he killed their abusive stepfather, so the girls could get away from him. And they owe their life to him. There's always a flip side of the coin. Sometimes, the criminal is just a criminal. Sometimes, it's just someone in a bad situation. A 57-year-old man on a life sentence high on spice, synthetic psychoactive cannabinoids, crawling around on the floor screaming because he can see his dead mother towering over him looking at him in disgust. Not a pleasant thing to see. Edit, especially when you're stuck in a cell with him. Edit 2, doing the same drug I've mentioned above, a 22-year-old man ended up flooding his cell, setting it on fire and killing himself whilst on the drug, 2 months before finishing his sentence. Another one is where a guy sliced his fucking dick in half, and again set fire to his cell, because the drug made him think erections are evil. So yay, stay away from spice. I. No mother, that sailor suit doesn't fit anymore. Quote. When I was young, I was 15 or 16 at the time. Most of us there were older teens. 11-year-old kid was brought in for throwing rocks at one of his teachers' homes. Had an older fat guard who worked there, these were generally civilian guards, given we were juveniles. Well, this guy, named Travis, started being weird with the kid. At first kid was like any other 11-year-old. Happy-go-lucky. Travis got really handsy with him. At meal times he was like actively rubbing on him. We all saw it, was a lockdown facility, so we weren't let out of our cells much either, but we all witnessed it. Guy was like rubbing his back, touching his leg. Within a few days, kid's whole attitude changed. We all knew Travis was molesting him, even though we couldn't prove it. Fuck. And that poor kid wasn't the only victim of that predator, I bet. Probably took that job so that he could find victims. Ugh, yeah, he would do other weird shit, like we had a shower room, one shower, so showered alone. A guard would bring us out, we had 5 minutes or so to shower, get back to our cells. Most guards would shut the door or leave it cracked and let us do our thing. He would leave it all the way open and be watching. Noticed he wouldn't try shit with any of us. Probably because bigger, older and stronger could put up a good fight. But this little kid couldn't. I knew a guy who was never in trouble in his life. He was working in the automotive industry in Michigan and lost his job. He fell behind with child support payments and ended up doing time in jail. His very first night his two cellmates got into an argument because one of them couldn't find his bear claw snack. They finally stopped arguing and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, he was woken up by the guy beating the guy he accused of theft. He literally beat the guy to death. Apparently he had gotten a hold of some kind of pole or stick. The entire cell was just completely covered in blood. They end up finding out that the guy he accused of stealing it didn't steal it after all. I'll never forget the fear and look in Guy's eyes when he told me what happened. It's absolutely fucked that being behind in child support will land you in jail. Being poor in America is a crime. They'll revoke your driver's license for it too, I've heard, which makes absolutely no sense to me. I went to county for about a week in the middle of nowhere, Kansas on a drug charge. I was 19 years old, scared shitless. It was a room with about 4 communal picnic benches and 2 rooms on either side with about 6 bunks in them. I noticed one was full, and the other had just one guy in there. So not understanding the situation at all, I went over to the empty bunks and a guy grabbed my shoulder and just gave me a hard look that said, "No," but without saying a word. Then I noticed the other prisoners were camped out in corners on their mattress. I did the same. Found out quickly that the solo guy was in for crime against a child. I have never heard such as an ass whooping more. That night, I just covered my ears and stared at the wall. How did I get here? And the sobbing and pleading. I was bonded out the next day. Edit, a couple people have asked. This was in 1992, my spring break of college freshman year. I was driving to visit a friend of mine in Wichita. I never had to serve time, first offense, good lawyer, college kid, etc. I got extremely lucky. Exactly what happened to my ex. We were busted for weed. He screwed up one of his screens during probation and ended up in county, but for months until a court date, no bond. It was horrible for a number of reasons, but for him, being a laid-back Lebowski type of guy, listening to the chomo being beaten in the middle of the night was disturbing on a number of levels. Not sure if this was asked elsewhere. What does chomo mean? 17 years old kid was in my block. His name was Israel. He had been kicked out of his grandma's house a few months prior for doing drugs, so he was living on the streets. He got picked up for package theft. He was only in for 30 days, but he was enjoying every minute of it. Because he was young and a generally good dude, people looked out for him. I taught him how to play spades. At the end of the 30 days, he didn't want to get out. He didn't want to go back to life on the street with no food. He was planning on doing something to get himself back in there, but I tried convincing him that's not where he wanted to be. I told him he needed to go talk to his grandma, quit doing drugs, and try to get a job to help her pay her bills and keep him out of trouble so he could get his own place sometime soon. He heard me, but I doubt he was listening. If I had to guess, he probably got himself locked up again, but I sure hope not. I had a roommate named Israel in the early O. He was into meth. Oddly enough though, he was a great roommate, never noisy, cleaned house, etc. Ended his relationship with my roommate and left. He was in and out of jail for a little bit and I lost track of him until about 2018 when a friend of a friend posted a pic of her and her man at the pumpkin patch. It was Israel and he had cleaned himself up. If jail is where he got the best kind of attention, I bet grandma was a shitty person as well as the rest of his biological family. His home life sounded pretty terrible. His role model was his first stepdad if I remember right. Dude was a meth head. There was a guy whose girlfriend broke up with him while he was inside. So just before we walked out to go to lunch he had slit his wrists. His cellmate had to explain to the officer that he didn't do it, he did it to himself. Edit, wow. I can't believe this blew up the way that it did. I appreciate all of the upvotes. I have plenty of stories from being on the inside which are either funny or very depressing to think about. That's crazy, very sad for the guy that passed and his family. Can you imagine though the fear and shit the cellmate had to go through? Hopefully he wasn't charged with murder or something. I don't think that he was. It was pretty scary to think about because you never know what someone is going through even if you're in a cell with them. Hanging out one day in the law library. All of a sudden, some kid who was fresh came in minding his own business and just started reading something. One of my boys who was also in there, mind you I'd been locked up for over a year at this point with this dude, he was chill and in there for coke dealing, got up, walked over to the younger kid, and beat the living fuck out of him. Like, not just knocked him out. I'm saying literally beat the life out of him. Blood flying everywhere. The kid was on the ground and dude just kept smashing his face in, it was like literally caved in. I got up and just stepped back and watched so I wouldn't get jumped by the cause when they came in. They literally dragged this lifeless kid away and cuffed the dude I knew. I saw him once more before I got out, and I asked him what TF happened that day. All he said was, I felt like fucking somebody up. Needless to say, I've had serious trust issues since then, and since being locked up in general. Seeing that literal 18-year-old get beat to death in front of me was pretty fucked. I sincerely hope that cunt is still in prison and he will be for the rest of his useless, miserable life. I hope he's dead. Prison might not stop him from doing something like that again. Was in with someone, let's call him Carlos, was up for review serving a dime and he got a new roomie who tried to clap his cheeks. Carlos had no choice but to stick him and he added another 5 years to his term when he was likely gonna be free that year. From what we understand he did tell the guards and review board that he was defending himself from being raped but not sure what the outcome was other than he added more time. Edit, update, wow didn't realize how many likes this got. Thank you all. I just asked my boy who stayed in the same block with Carlos about how his release date and Carlos did in fact get out on time in 2017. The new roommate had a reputation and many other das in his paperwork about other rapes in prison which came into play for his review. Edit, update, I was serving 3 to 5 for conspiracy to fraud and aggravated assault 3. Ended up serving 2 years in Arizona for good behavior and participation. I didn't do it, lawyer fucked me, Shawshank Redemption. Dick equals stab. No, he just tried to clap cheeks back harder to assert dominance. You understood the clap cheeks reference but not the stick one. Interesting. I was working on servery, so I was out of my cell every day all day. One day I was told by the screw to check on the cells on the ground floor. I opened one of the door flaps and this guy, he was standing in the middle of the room, with shirt off, crying. Then proceeded to slash both his wrists. Called help, he made it. But not long after hung himself. Well, that was certainly a rollercoaster of emotions. Sounds like more of a free fall of emotions to me.